Hi, it's Velindaba here, your neuroengineer. I'm all about transforming minds from a place of mental darkness to mental light. And I do this and I achieve this by using the high-performance tool called the Velindaba Neuroengineering Leadership Effect, which is solely based on neuroscience, engineering, as well as motivation, because I truly believe that you need motivation for you to get to the peak of your life, because without any motivation, then there's nothing much that's going to happen with you. And I'm sitting here with someone that, when I looked at her resume, and I said to myself, wow, I just love this. You know, there are a few things that actually caught my attention when I look at it, because I don't just get to choose to speak to anyone, but there must be some sort of a criteria that one has to meet in order for us to sit and just be able to share some ideas in terms of leadership and, you know, just to pick their brains on certain things, because it's all about ensuring that people don't aspire or want to rush for things that they are not ready for. Because we've heard of so many things in the world where people are told that, oh, just work hard, you're going to be there. So for me, it's a question of unpacking that. What does it look like, you know, to get there, besides just working hard? And the person that I have in studio today is Andisa Liba. I think one thing that I really loved when I looked at her profile, it's not just an HR executive, but she is the award-winning HR executive. You know, she's a connector, she's a catalyst, she's a Pan-Africanist, she's a technocrat. I mean, she is one of the co-founders of Women in Tech's...
Women's Tech Connection.
Women in Tech?
Women's Tech Connection, but close enough.
Women's Tech Connection. So this is very important, that we're going to talk to someone who is very much, you know, in the know, someone who really understands how things happen out there. And I would like to introduce Andisa to you, the listeners and the viewers of our podcast. Andisa.
Yes, sir.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. And I'm actually so honored and pleased that you honored our invitation.
No, I'm honored to be here.
You showed up in raid, and I can see it. You just made sure that you're going to put some fire in
I
here.
mean business. I mean business.
Thank you so very kindly. and maybe just quickly, I mean, for our listeners, our viewers, just take us through who Andisa is, maybe just in short, and as well as you are in HR and you are also in technology, you're driving technology. I think as part of introducing yourself, maybe, what I would like to find out is, as well, how was your childhood like? You know, what did you have around you? What was the environment like, you know, for you, growing up?
So interesting environment. I was raised by, I guess, political activists. And so I come, out of a school of thought that is centered around liberation, that has taught me that doing the right thing should be a way of life. And so I was very blessed in that sense. I had people who were deeply committed to the liberation of our people, to the liberation of this country. Yes. And so from a very early age, it was, fairly ingrained in me that I should always, create space and room to stand up. And I think to be courageous and to be brave and to be bold. So I'm very thankful that I was raised in and around politicians and liberal minds. I mean, my folks and my extended family, very, very liberal minds, very progressive in thought. And so that was a privilege I don't take lightly. I don't think a lot of young black kids had that growing up. And so it really was a privilege, coming out of that. But who is Andisa? I'd like to think I am a bit of an attention economist. I think there is value in paying attention to the right things, in application in the things that we learn and the things that are at our disposal, and how do you use them and pull them as levers for greater good. But yes, as you said, I'm a Pan-Africanist. I'm a catalyst. I enjoy the art of starting new things and building. When I was young, I loved building puzzles and Legos, and also I'm a builder. So I like starting things. I like connecting dots because because I'm an attention economist, I like, again, it's that puzzly thing from a young age, putting things together. So, my team always jokes with people who know me that, if you need something, Andy knows the person who knows the person knows the person.
Wow.
So I can connect the dots very quickly. I can pick up, I've got a very colorful black book.
Wow.
I can call anyone, right? I can get someone on the other line. And I think most importantly, maybe the part I enjoy, which is why I'm here, is the art of storytelling. So I'm a storyteller in that sense. I've used my career as a springboard to, I think, to tell maybe a different story and to drive a different rhetoric of what a young black, senior executive is outside of, constructs that we've seen.
And I really like that, because the reason why I like asking that question is simply because, when people become leaders, they may have been influenced either by their parents or the community, some people that they looked up to growing up and say, wow, one day I want to be like this person. So, or it's just something that happened and maybe you learned it along the way. So it's very important sort of to get to understand, what influenced you. And I think we spoke about it. I mean, as a senior HR executive, I'm sure you have actually seen some things, I mean, like to some people who are even coming up. Maybe quickly, what can you say around that? Because we're talking about leaders. I mean, for you to get to that, I think we spoke about something, I mean, offline. We were just talking about it. It's something that I'm very passionate about. We've got a school of thought that says, or that fights for work-life balance. And yet at the same time, you just want to reach the peak of your career. You want to be the best in your field. You want to be that person that people look at and they say, wow, you know what, he is the example of that. So what can you say about that, about being, because for you are operating at the highest level. Now, what did you say to someone? What do you think was it just hard work? What did you say about that? do you have work-life balance, maybe to start off with?
So let's get the declaration out of the way. I do not have work-life balance. And I'll tell you why. I think, and my view is that the ascension to the top has a very hefty price. There's a price tag that needs to be paid for that. Highly ambitious and highly driven people tend to not have work-life balance. And it's bad if I say that something has to suffer, but there is a price that needs to be paid for success. It may be social. There were the first 18 months when I'd started my NPO, Women's Tech Connection, I had very little of a social life for 18 months. You couldn't really get a hold of me on the weekends. I was working every Saturday, putting together proposals, writing a strategy, having the strategy approved. We used to, my two co-founders and I, used to work every Tuesday night for 18 months between 5 and 9 o'clock, so I'd get home at 10. So there's a price to be paid for that. It meant that every Tuesday, my young children at the time, I didn't tuck them into bed. Every Tuesday for 18 months. So there's a price to be paid for that. I think the tenets to success, depending on who you are and your sense of awareness, because there isn't a manual that teaches us that when the stroke of luck hits you, you need to know how to capitalize it. And I think sometimes there's so many people who can miss that so easily. And so I think whilst, yes, I think working hard is important, it's one of the many tenets. I recognize also that we were raised by, I think, elders who believed and subscribed to that. And I think there was a time and place in history where that was applicable. I mean, like my mom used to say, you must just keep your head down. Like your work must speak for itself. And I'm like, Mina, keep my head down. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm as vocal as they come. I don't know how to keep my head down in corporate. That's not in my makeup. Yes. But in the world she lived in, she worked for the same employer for 29 years. Wow. That worked at that time. We live in a time now where the construct of work is evolving, which for me informs that the leadership framework needs to progress with that.
Yes. Wow, you know what? And when people look at you, especially on social media, you are in all different platforms. I mean, you are crisscrossing the world, and they look at it and say, wow, I just want to be like, Andisa. She's got that thing. When people talk about that, she's got that thing. But they need to understand that there's a hefty price to pay for that. Because people tend to be very, very much, like fixated in wanting to be like someone, and yet they're not willing to pay the price. I mean,
this is the danger. And this is a danger. Sorry to interrupt you, but this is a danger, I think, with social media, is that if you look at it from that superficial lens, right, we make these things look glamorous.
Yes.
Right? We don't tell the backstory. The backstory is, as we sit today, I'm exhausted. I was at a conference all of last week. I was traveling. I got in on Saturday night. It was my child's birthday. I had to run around yesterday, and I had a full day of work, so I have not had rest. And so, the curation of the story that we curate for online, I think people who watch us, we put out the story of, oh, look at me, I'm everywhere, I'm speaking at the thing, I'm da-da-da-da, right? And we make it look so glamorous and so sexy and so exciting. But the amount of work that goes into that, right, the work that goes behind the scenes, the amount of hours I had to spend doing research, looking up the topics that I was going into this conference, which sessions did I want to attend, which individuals did I want to earmark to network with, right? And then to curate a whole week's worth of work, to then arrive in Cape Town and have a plan, because no one's given me that plan. They've given me a platform, they've given me access. And I think that's why I often say that proximity to power reveals character. And depending who you are, and we've seen this in good and bad leaders, in good leaders, they embrace the role that they are here to lead and to unearth something out of others.
Yes.
In bad leaders, it corrupts them, right? They have access to power, they go mad, right? They throw their weight around, all of a sudden they must be feared, their presence is scary, everyone must run to their desks when this guy walks in the office. It's chaos and mayhem. And that is because if you haven't done the work, the shadow work, before you become a leader, right, it reveals character. So it'll reveal, right, if you're going to be power hungry when you eventually find power. Or it reveals that you will respect the office in which you serve in because you will treat it as a privilege.
Absolutely.
Because not many get to lead people.
And I'm so happy that we've actually, touched on this leadership issue, because I'm always very keen, because it's very, we need to be able to put a finger to it.
Yeah.
When you talk about good leaders and bad leaders, I think you've just, mentioned, few things, and I would like us maybe just to unpack it a bit, in terms of, when you talk about bad leaders and you talk about good leaders, let's start off with a good leader. When you see a good leader, how do you really look at them? How do you see them and say, this is a good leader? Maybe in terms of, the qualities. And maybe we can even draw some contrast, between the two. Maybe what can you say based on your experiences? Because there's a lot of power, when you talk about power plays out there, where people want to show that I've arrived, I'm there. And that's where toxicity, and I talk about, when I talk in my workshop and my talks about dark leadership, leadership darkness, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So, but from your own experience, because definitely there's someone out there right now who's experiencing what you're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Because, you look at it, it's very interesting for me that you look at social media. People will say, no, just confront your bosses. Don't let them. You've got to stand up for yourself. You've got to stand up for your right. But is it really that easy? Why is it that people don't stand up to those bosses? Because it's always easy to dispense, these advices. But why is it? Let's talk about reality here, because it's something that's very interesting, because we're trying to help others see this.
I think the short answer to the latter part of your question is, and I always caution against, being flimsy with giving out that kind of advice. Because I can say that, but I've got the toolkit to know what to do if it goes wrong.
Absolutely.
And often we don't give people that toolkit. So we give them this piece of advice, go and tell him, write him the email, right? And then the whole thing backfires, right? And then we make, and it compounds on an already bad situation, and it creates an even bigger inflammation between the parties. Conflict management is a very delicate dance. Not everyone is skilled in managing conflict. And I think we must always be cautious in easily dishing out pieces of advice. To go back to your former question around, what is a good leader? What does a good leader look like? What is a bad leader? I will start by saying I think people who respect the office that they serve in, I think for me that is a very first indication. Because again, it goes back to character. I think someone who understands that them being in a leadership position, they've got a moral duty of care in the workplace. That's what it's about, right?
Stewardship.
It's stewardship. Right, it is the ability to say, yes, whilst I am the leader, I am here to help you grow and to empower you, to give you autonomy, or to give you whatever tools for you to succeed. Yes. When you don't succeed, my role as well is to be here and to be the fail-safe mechanism, to catch you before you fall too far, and to give you remedies to the solution. And you've got to do that outside of a place of ego. So it requires so much compassion, understanding, giving, patience. And often if we then look at the flip side of this coin, a bad leader is very itchy and very quick to want to grab the corporate sticks and use them. Yeah. They're there for a reason, sure. But they're not always necessary to always deploy when things go wrong. And a good leader knows this. A bad leader goes, Andisa is not performing, it's October, it's end of the quarter, we've got targets. Yeah, let's call HR disciplinary hearing, hey? Like, let's put her on a PIP, what. And that's why I'm saying, the sticks are there for a reason. And sure, there are times when their deployment is necessary. But you've got to have, I think, the know-how to know when they're necessary to use, when is it an opportunity to coach. Absolutely. And a good leader knows that I don't need sometimes to go and whack someone, yes. right? Or throw the book at them, yes. right? I can remedy the situation through training and coaching. Or even better, like my leaders I've worked for, they'll always say, I'm going to encourage you to take some leave. I think you've reached capacity. You're not performing at your best. You maybe just need 1 or 2 days. So take 2 days off, fill up your cup, come back, and we'll try and find momentum. Wow. Bad leader goes, you're not performing. There's a problem. Yes. Where's HR? Where's the book? That's how we're going to solve this problem, right? It comes from a lack of aggression than rather a lack of understanding. Because had you just simply consulted with someone and show some empathy and create an environment and space of psychological safety, yes. perhaps they could have simply said, I'm just tired. That's all it is, right? I've got the skills to do the job. I just don't have the capacity. So if you can just afford me 2 days off, I'll take Friday and Monday. I'm going to fill my cup. I'm going to come back on Tuesday and I'm going to deliver. See, that's a different conversation than an HR conversation to say, oh, where's the thing, and let's put you in a disciplinary, or let's put you on a PIP. That's not really a solve. And I think that often is, this isn't everything. It's definitely at a very high level, some of the differences between a good leader and a bad leader. Yes.
But because something that actually interests me as well is it comes back to skills. Lack of. Where you find a bad leader is trying to sort of like to make it look like someone is bad. Mm-hmm. And whereas they are the ones who are falling short in terms of that, because one of the things that we talk about is self-confidence. Mm. Because when you talk about, from neuroscience, for an example, self-confidence is the ability to say, I'm not in the know. I don't know about this. Can someone teach me? Guys, I've made a mistake. Guys, you know what? I'm a bit scared on this one. Can someone maybe just, sort of like explain to me how this thing works? But what people tend to, when they lack that self-confidence, ego tends to take over.
100%.
Which is a problem. And most of them, they don't even have skills. They end up being toxic. But have we ever noticed or experienced someone who was known, in the organization that he was just a bad or terrible leader. But then they kept on getting promoted and promoted. Have you ever experienced something like that?
Unfortunately, I have more than once. I think there are corporate structures or environments, I think, that not necessarily award bad behavior, but they are more focused and committed to the outcomes. So, i.e., Andy is not pleasant to work with. She's rude to her colleagues, but she gets the job done.
Yes.
And there are people who are willing to live with all the casualties I leave behind in my quest to deliver the number.
Absolutely.
And I think this is where conscious leadership is really super important. Around how do we define what are good, outcomes, right? And there's many people who stay in corporate for many years. They're technically good at what they do. They're destructive in the how. They leave casualties behind them all the time, right? And executives or board know who these individuals are, but they often sometimes feel, I don't know if we can lose her. Like, she brings in so much revenue. Like, how do we navigate this? And because after a while, because we as humans, we're creatures of habit, right?
Absolutely.
If you allow people to break certain boundaries, after a while it becomes behavioral. So now all of a sudden, Andy expects a higher level of tolerance from everyone else than her having to readjust and go, okay, actually my behavior is toxic to this environment. But, if you let me get away with it for long enough as a leader, as a bad leader, I'll start expecting you to have tolerance. Why? Because, well, at the end of the day, I bring in the numbers. So like deal with my temperament, deal with my ego, deal with my bullying tactics, deal with all the baggage that I come with and all the dead bodies behind me. Somebody must go and pick them up.
Yes.
And I'll put more.
You see, that's the thing, because it's always very interesting as well that when you look at HR, I mean, you are a senior HR exec, and when you look at these things, I'm sure you must have dealt with some cases or instances where someone is like exactly, like the description that you've just given. And you find yourself falling short because your seniors are saying, oh, we need him, he's a striker. He brings the numbers. And yet everyone is crying about the person. And have you ever dealt with something like that? I know it's quite an awkward thing, because people end up saying, but where's HR? Because if you look at I was reading something, one of them from the Center of Creative Leadership.
Yeah.
Also one of it came through from Harvard Business Review, where we talk about the fact that over 70% of the people don't trust HR. Because of the very same things, because they know that if they go to HR, then they're going to become even more of the victims. So I was just long-winded.
It's complex, and I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. But I think let me try and just systematically answer this. HR's role, yes, is there to, I think, help business leaders to navigate tough conversations against the guardrails of labor laws, against the guardrails of company policies, right? There's procedures and policies that are put in place to help govern certain tough conversations. HR doesn't always make the final decision, right? It's a consultative approach. Yeah? So if I am the head of HR, you're the CEO, my job is to be your moral compass and to help you reason. Now, I can only hope that you've got relational intelligence. I can't do it on my own.
Definitely.
I can't do it on my own. So if you're the CEO and you don't have that, I've got one, mountain to climb. And I think it's difficult for people to reconcile some of that, because then it becomes well then if you can't sort out, then no one can, so therefore HR is ineffective. Right? And that in itself is a whole other conundrum.
I love that perspective.
It's a whole other conundrum. But that's the thing. So I've got the guardrails that govern how I do my job as a human capital professional, but I'm also in the same system, and sometimes I could be at the mercy of someone who needs to make the decision. My role is to give them, because this is, if you think of this in football terms or in sporting terms, right? You've got a team. The coach's role is to, one, have the blueprint,
Yes.
right? Have a strategy for the game going in.
Yes.
They stand on the sidelines and coach and make decision based on what they're seeing. Someone's running out of steam, they do what? They switch out. They switch out players, right? You don't exhaust your players like too long, right? You start making tactical decisions around who needs to move where to reach said outcome, right? So you're coaching from, but you also need people on the pitch who are capable of playing.
Absolutely.
So you can't do it only from this. So you could have the best strategy if you don't have the right mix of players. But in essence, it's taking all of those things and then making sure that the people on this pitch playing towards whatever the end goal is, find harmony in that play while you continue to make tactical decisions, while you continue to make strategic decisions. I mean, it's like a good game of chess. I taught my children how to play chess from a young age because I was trying to build a muscle in them for tactical thinking.
Yes. Yes.
From both of them, when they
Fantastic.
were 3 years old, and I went and I bought a chessboard and I said, I'm going to teach you how to tactically think, because that is the sometimes the thing with life, and we often get frustrated because we want to outsource our thinking and our moral conscience to somebody else.
Yeah.
It's now all of a sudden it's HR's job, it's always somebody else's job. So if you don't build that muscle from a young age, and if you weren't afforded that opportunity by circumstance, and it's no fault of yours, as an adult you have a responsibility to reparent yourself. You're existing with other adults.
True.
So I used to say I used to work at a company where there was a lot of youngsters, and I used to say, and one of them was like, oh, corporate politics, I don't want to play the game, rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, so the sad reality is this: the minute you sign that employment contract, you agreed to be on the pitch.
Yeah.
So the game is going to be played around you. You might have players who will tackle you because you're on the pitch. So, it's also one of those things where sometimes we do have to make decisions. And I know sometimes when we're under pressure, we feel the decision fatigue. And you're like, I know, like, no, HR must do something. Someone must do something.
Yes.
But that's not life.
Yeah. And I really love that, and the energy, the passion, that is great. That's exactly what I wanted, because you know what, I'm a passionate person myself. So, and I think that's the reason why we connected, because you've got people who stand up there and just like on social media and just throw these advices. Oh, no. Just believe in your dreams and you can achieve it. You can do that. But at the end of the day, we don't know how. So we want to try to unpack those things. And now I'm just looking, and I was thinking of this contrast, of two things that have just recently taken place. You've had a situation at First Rand, Rand Merchant Bank, where, like Mary Vilagazi, was, ascended to a CEO role, which is something, she was a CEO, Chief Operating Officer. And then, she went up. And at the same time, we've got a situation with Pick and Pay, where a CEO was let go. And then they brought in a retiree, someone who was out of the system for 17 years, just to come back and be a CEO, for this, organization. Now, I was just looking at this and I found it very interesting, because I'm saying these are two huge organizations and they are just doing things that are completely opposite. So looking at succession planning, good and bad. Maybe let's look at it and say, for someone out there who doesn't really understand this thing, what is succession planning, and why is it that we've got these two things? This one organization will do this, and this one will also do this, and yet, they're supposed to have done something similar. What did you say about that?
So I think succession planning is critical to business continuity.
Yes.
I think if you wanted to ensure that the engine runs, you've got to be intentional about transformation, not transformation through the lens of race or gender, but how do you transform an organization, and that takes a deep level of commitment with time and resources, right? Because you've now got to build up a pipeline of individuals that you earmark that may not be ready now, but they are starting at an earlier stage to show signs of readiness, right? And sure, I mean, there's multiple mental models that can be applied to the how and the criteria that you build out.
Yes.
But at a high level, you know, organizations have to be committed to doing it.
Yes.
Because once the commitment's there, then it's a lot less daunting to actually do it.
Yes. Because I wanted to also to find out, I think while you do, and I love it because you're looking at it from HR, you know, a perspective as well. To say, I think after having answered those, to look at it and say, why do others fail while others, you know, sort of like seem to be doing so well, you know, with it. I mean, like when you look at the wheel, because someone has to do it, you may have some policies in place, you may have some structure or governance for that matter, because you've got the board as well. And I'm sure it is actually incumbent on a CEO to ensure as well, and from HR, to ensure that every position, because when I was still in corporate as well, that's exactly it. I mean, we had, I mean, as a senior manager, I needed to have a plan in terms of who have I identified, let's say 2 or 3 people, that if something were to happen to me today, they would be able to run, and like coming back to what you alluded to, continuity. But if I don't have that, and that was actually linked to, you know, to my sort of like to my scorecard. So it means that
commitment.
That's something. It's commitment. So look at it, and my boss will look at it, and also his boss is going to look at his to say, who have you actually lined up? Who are we developing to ensure that this thing is happening? But now, when it fails like that at that level, then it's something that really is worrying. So what makes that thing? What makes that failure? What makes these organizations really fail? Or what leads to succession planning failure? From what you have seen.
Sure. I mean, I think outside of the commitment piece, I think when you don't have leaders who want to be accountability officers, the plan could fail.
Please unpack that. You know,
so it could be,
you know.
Accountability. So what I mean by this is, it's not enough to have a piece of paper that says, you know, I'm going to be your successor, and it sits on a drive or it sits on a file somewhere, and we've done it as a tick box exercise, right? There's got to be the skills transfer. So how am I being groomed? Right? What opportunities am I being given access to? What rooms couldn't I access prior to this that I'm now accessing? And so that's why I said transformation takes effort. It takes time. It takes resources. It's not just about planning. And so all good and well, I think the other organization, I won't mention the name, they could have had a succession plan in theory. But if it's not in action, so i.e., you know, you are running, you know, a massive organization like that. And, you know, it begs the question, so is there no coverage for all the KIs in the business? We've got key individuals who could be run over by a bus. Someone could, you know, not to, you know, want anything to happen to anyone. But I mean, you know, these are real life scenarios. So you have to, you know, kind of scenario map out and say, if Andy wasn't here or she got ill, right? Like, what would happen to her role? Right? Who would pick it up? Who's got capacity? Who's got a similar subset of skills that can complement? So they may not pick it up and do it as well as she does, but, you know, how can we build a bridge to ensure, again, business continuity? Because that's what it's about at the end of the day. Because for you and I as the consumer, whether it is an actual product or otherwise a service, right? I care less about what your succession. I want to walk into a store and buy a loaf of bread and walk out. I want a cashier to be there. I want the bread to be stocked on the shelves. I'm not invested in your corporate politics.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I think, and perhaps I'm oversimplifying it. But I mean, that really is what it is in the absentia of an individual, what happens? How much disruption is there? So, you know, can we measure that vacuum? So if Andy is the only person in this organization that has that core skill set, perhaps we need to look at her 2IC. Is there a 2IC? If not, is there someone in a parallel vertical that has some of the competencies that she has? And we can, you know, in the short term, build them up to, again, you build that bridge so that in the event something happens, not everything collapses, right? You then move people across. Some organizations, again, are very intentional about doing this. Again, as I said, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes commitment. And when those things are missing, it shows.
Absolutely, and I'm sure some are by design and some are by default.
Some are by circumstance, right? But I think this is also the importance of building out multiple plans, right? There needs to be a plan A, plan B, plan C. So, it doesn't mean that we'll activate plan B first before C. It could be that over time, C actually becomes a much valuable asset to the equation. But it's about having that, in your war chest.
Yes.
And you can pull different things and you can pull different levers. And so it can't be one person. We can't say, oh, we'll train Andy. And, Andy will be CEO in waiting or CEO in whatever. Right, you've got to fully understand your talent pool, and I think if there is a vacuum and if there are, aspects and certain competences missing, then there's a fundamental organization effectiveness problem.
Yes.
Then it's either you need to get an actual subject matter expert who specializes in designing organizational structures to then earmark where do you then plug and close that vacuum if you can.
Absolutely.
And even that in itself, that takes commitment.
And also, I'm sure it's got to do with how the culture has been structured. Organizational culture, that is, because once it's actually in place, things are just gonna go. It doesn't just become something that someone wakes up to the other day and say, okay, no, I'll decide that when this thing needs to be done, it's going to get done.
Yeah.
But in terms of the culture, in terms of how you do things there, and you hire someone because the structure and the culture is sound, then everyone is going to fall into place. It's just going to get in and run on with it.
But also, culture is a living, organ, right?
Absolutely.
It's the DNA,
Absolutely.
right? And
Absolutely.
And culture's got there's subsets of cultures, right? Because again, it's relational intelligence. So you have people where they just simply don't get along, right? There's no harmony, but they get the job done.
Yes.
Right, and so there might be a bit of a hostile culture to someone who is sitting on the other side of the organization. Or you could have a bunch of happy clappies, right? Folks who are just happy. Everyone's a happy, morning person. They come in, they have coffee together at the kitchen. Like it's just harmonious. It's just pleasant.
It's very rare.
Which is also very rare. But again, culture is. I think it's like any relationship.
Yes.
Right, you put in the effort, you work at it. I don't think you have a design and then you hope it works. You hope it continues to work, because it can work this year and next year something happens and the next year it actually doesn't work. But it's the same people, it's the same environment, but there's been a shift.
Like a team, things happen. And I think as we draw to a close, and I think I just want to ask maybe just 2 or 3 questions. I think one of them is, you've seen different kinds of leaders. Like male leaders and female leaders. I don't like always to look at it from the gender perspective, but I think there are many things that gets to be discussed out there. People throwing these ideas around and these narratives, women are better leaders than men and whatever. What did you say? What's your take on that? Would you base it on gender, or would you base it on just someone being a good leader? What's your take on that? Do you think women make better leaders than men?
So I don't think gender makes you a better leader. I think who you are and your character makes you a good leader, whether you're male or female. I'm conscious of these rhetorics around, like women are multitaskers, so they can do multiple things, blah, blah, blah. But I think different scenarios require different muscles of leadership.
Absolutely.
And it's dependent on the individual that shows up, and you hope that it's the right person who has done the work, who knows how to unearth greatness in others, who knows how to create an environment that lends itself to successful outcomes and a pleasant experience along the journey.
Yes.
And so I don't think that should ever be looked at through the lens of gender. I don't think gender, either which way the coin lands, makes you a better leader. I think leadership also requires, I think, a lot of work from the individual, and a lot of self-awareness. But yeah, I think on the issue of women and leadership, and I think we have these conversations. I think sometimes we have them without context.
Absolutely. And I like that, Andy, that you've actually put that across, because, looking at the interventions that I actually provide that are brain-based, there's no such, because when you look at, on fMRI scans, that is, if you look at how the brain neurons network, look like between men and women in terms of leadership, there's no difference there. It's a question of which pathway is activated when you do something, because you've got a task positive network and you've got a default mode network. So the other one is more about us. It's more socially sort of like based, whereas the other one is more task based. So it doesn't matter. So I help leaders understand in terms of which one they need to be able to control. And also, it's not a question of which one is better. Is it this task positive network, or is it the default mode network? It's actually a combination of both, but it's about trying to balance depending on the task at hand.
And that's why I think I made the comment earlier around, power, proximity to power reveals character.
Absolutely.
Right? And so different people react differently when they are stimulated in different ways, or otherwise in the same ways. You could have the same scenario with two of the same gender, and you might have two different reactions.
Yes.
Right? And that's why I say, gender doesn't make you a good leader. I think how you take in and how you process stimuli in that environment, and how you show up, hopefully to be consciously aware of the decisions that you make.
Yes,
that's what
true.
Determines whether or not you have it in you to inherently act in the best interest of others, and to act fairly and to be just.
Absolutely.
And that's outside of gender.
I just love that, how you've actually given that. And I think before I ask my final favorite question, that I'm sure my guests love, I just want to ask you this. Maybe what sort of advice would you give to someone who aspire to be a leader or to be leaders one day? And those people who say, one day I just want to be a leader, because they look in terms of perks, they look in terms of, because mainly it's because of perks. When I drive that huge car.
It's the optics.
Yeah, the optics. I just want to look at that. What did you say to someone like that? Either someone is is just completing their varsity years, or someone has just started, into, this leadership journey, or is somewhere in the middle. What did you say about wanting to get to the top?
I think work on yourself. And let learning be a continuous experience, because what leadership will do is that it really pushes a lot of your buttons, and you are measured on how you respond.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it becomes less about, oh no, but she said it, all these things happen. No. It's about how you responded and how you showed up. And I think it's important to understand in what environments, trigger you to react worse, what environments trigger you to react best.
Yes.
And then you start working on your blind spots.
Yes.
Because a leadership role reveals that. So if you're someone who's impatient, you're going to hate having to go through people's emails when they email you stuff and ask you for things and they want answers, and you are the one who's supposed to give it, or to approve things, or to proofread documents, etc., right? And so if patience isn't your virtue, work on patience. If communication isn't your thing, work on learning how to communicate, and communicate effectively and clearly.
And because while you're talking about communication, some people think, or they mistaken communication with good English. That if you can speak good English, then you're a good communicator, which is not always the case, because communication is about getting the message across, not how well you speak English, because you get some people who are so good, at speaking English or speaking the language, but without saying anything.
Communication is about impact, not necessarily the intention.
Thank you.
So whether that's through the construct of language or something else, you can intend something, but if its impact lands negatively, it's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game, right? Yeah. Because it's about the impact, and I think this is where, before you become or you take on a leadership role, I think exercise that muscle in smaller environments. If you are a church going or you belong to some kind of community-based setting, right? Put your hand up, volunteer, right, to do stuff, because it's going to test you.
Yes.
Right? Working with people is a testament of how you respond in different situations, and it reveals your character, either good or bad. So before you get to that place at work, if you belong to groups, put your hand up. If you can mentor young ones at a high school, they will challenge you.
Yes.
And it's about understanding that when you get to very close to the cliff,
yes,
what is your natural reaction?
Yes.
There's something that happens in fight or flight. There are some people who will instinctively give up. There are some people who push past the pain and they will unlock a new level of discomfort.
Yes.
And leadership is a continuous cycle of that. Just when I thought I was patient enough, someone just pushes me over the edge. And then I get through that, I go, sheesh, I'm a lot more patient than what I thought I was.
Yeah.
And it's the same with, just the human frame, right? I climbed and summited Kilimanjaro. I got to base camp and I had a lung infection, and my doctor said, I'm going to rule you out, but this is your body, this is your journey, you now need to make the decision. But I'm absolving myself, right? There's an indemnity form, something happens to you after this point, this is all on you. And I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to see how far I can go.
Yeah.
And I summited on all fours, coughing my lung. But what that taught me is that when I thought I'd hit my peak in terms of what I can take in from a discomfort perspective, I went and I unlocked the next level of discomfort.
Absolutely.
And there's a lesson in that outside of the physical. Sure, I came back home like very ill, and that was not the intention. And so that's why it's important to sometimes place yourself in environments that really make you uncomfortable. And based on how you react, that is sometimes a good, diptych test,
yes,
of your tolerance, because leadership requires a lot of tolerance.
Yeah.
Dealing with people, having the empathy. Like, empathy isn't easy either, right? Because leaders are also not immune to life's challenges in their own right. So I can have a bad day at home, I can have a sick child, I can't come into work and be like, oh, you have to show up.
That's a reality.
That's the reality, right? Because there's people who have that expectation out of you, right? And you're not always, I think, afforded the compassion that you give as well, as a leader. And so we may make it look glamorous, we make it look easy. I think some of us who have had the benefit of a training ground,
yes,
we've had to pay very hefty school fees.
Thank you very much, Andisa. I think we've been treated so well here, and I'm sure the listeners and the viewers are going to be so excited. I mean, this is a treat.
I hope so.
And I really think it's not about something to please people, but this is a free university, so to speak. And I think this leads me to my last question.
Yes.
My last question is, just in one sentence or so, how would you like to be remembered? What words would you like the world to use to describe you, the experience that they have when they look at you? What would you like your legacy to be?
I'd like people to think of me as someone who is not shy to, I think, unlock the magic in others. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. And it requires a lot of grit. It requires a lot of self-sacrifice. It requires a lot of giving. And so the thing I always go back to is, I treat leadership as servantship. I'm here to serve. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm operating from a place of my ego, and I never want to do that. And so the ability and the privilege to unlock the magic in others is something I want people, when they think of the name Andisa. You know, in the African culture, you know, they always say, like, we, you know, sometimes we live up to our names.
Yes.
And my name is Andisa, means multiplier.
Yes. Yes.
And that's exactly what it is unlocking the magic in others, but effectively it's the multiplier effect.
Absolutely.
And so if I could live to that, and to live to the fullness of that name, and to constantly create the multiplier effect in all the spaces that I'm in, I could get to my resting place and I'll be fine.
Wow. Andisa, what a blessing you've been to us. Thank you so very kindly.
Thank you.
You know, for joining us, and to our viewers and to our listeners. I'm not sure if you were to not jump up and down right now when you listen to this podcast and you view this podcast, what will be wrong with your upstairs. But thank you so very kindly. And like I've said, that my purpose is to transform minds from a place of mental darkness to mental light. And how I achieve this, once again, is to join hands with like-minded people. I mean, the great minds, the Andisas of this world. I mean, who are up there, who are experiencing what we've been talking about. It's not just something that I hope one day I'm going to be like that, one day when I'm there, but I'm talking to people who are already there and talking about the real life situations and the real life experiences. And yes, for me, I'm just so excited, and I really hope that you're going to get that. And I'd like to thank you so very much for tuning in. Thank you so very kindly.